Hi, I'm Chris. This is Finding God at Work. Just a reminder that Finding God at Work isn't just a podcast, it's also an online course. Check it out at findinggodatwork.org. Our current series is Take a Stand, Faithful Political Witness at Work. And in our current section of the series, we're looking at specific political issues and how we can think through them, pray through them as disciples of Jesus, so that that can inform how we love others in the workplace when those issues come up in conversation or as they affect our actual workplaces and our workplace relationships. And if you're still with me at this point, after we've already tackled the controversial issues of immigration and abortion, really appreciate it. I'm going to tackle another issue, which is perhaps less controversial, although there's still public debate about it, which is food insecurity. And in this, I get to draw on my experience of working at a regional food bank. So I get to draw a little bit on something that I have a little more personal experience with. But I want to use this issue to kind of explore a specific thing you can do in work conversations. So this one's a little bit more tactical, a little bit more like, hey, in a specific work conversation, what's a good thing that you can do to express love for the person you're talking with and for the people that are affected by these different issues. So I want you to think back to maybe high school social studies class. Did you ever have an assignment where you were assigned a perspective to defend, regardless of whether you agreed with it? So maybe there was a debate about the American Revolution or something, and one group of the class was assigned to defend the loyalist position of not rebelling, staying loyal to Britain, and the other was assigned to defend the American revolutionary position. This is a really good pedagogical tool, right? Because it forces students to think through, what are the strongest arguments for this view, whether I agree with it or not. Okay, so I want to do something similar in what I suggest about political conversations, and that's this. Can you articulate a commitment to a gospel value while also charitably presenting the opposite political viewpoint as your own? Okay, let me say that again. Can you articulate a commitment to a gospel value while also charitably presenting the political viewpoint that is opposite to your own? Okay, now that might sound a little abstract, so we're going to give the example using food insecurity as the issue. So what is the gospel value when it comes to food insecurity? What's that precious thing that we hold in common with other believers, regardless of our specific political convictions? Well, I would say it's the gospel value of caring for those who are vulnerable, caring for those who may face food insecurity, doing whatever it takes to make sure people have the food they need to thrive. So let's just use one biblical text of many that address this specific issue, Matthew 25. This is probably a familiar passage. This is one of Jesus' teachings that he uses to prophetically speak about his own return. So starting in verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right, and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison, and did not help you?" He will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Okay, this is an intense teaching of Jesus. He's saying that the way we treat the most vulnerable in our society, that's the way we're treating Jesus himself. And he's also saying that when he judges us, the expression of our faith in Jesus, in loving the vulnerable, will be the kind of evidence on which he assesses, was our faith in him genuine or not? So that's pretty intense. If you're like, I believe in Jesus, but then you do nothing to help the vulnerable, Jesus is like, I don't think you really believe in me. I don't think your faith is genuine, because this is the basis on which he makes this judgment of who enters into his kingdom. This is about a way of life that we enter into as disciples of Jesus. But Jesus is saying part of that way of life is caring for the vulnerable, including those who don't have enough food to eat. It's very clear. That was the first thing listed in all of his examples in that passage with both the sheep and the goats. I was hungry. And do you give him something to eat or not? Okay, so that's the gospel value. That's something that Christians across the political spectrum can hold in common, is we believe that it's our responsibility as disciples of Jesus to help those who face hunger, help those who face food insecurity. Okay, now I'm using a contemporary phrase there, food insecurity. So I just want to kind of tease out what do I mean by that. And it's a phrase like financial insecurity that's meant to convey, hey, the situation that people are facing. So in the past, we tended to use the word hunger, but hunger can describe something that's happening in your body, right? Like a sensation. So this more technical term, food insecurity, was introduced to try and distinguish from the physical experience of hunger to, hey, what's the overall kind of social condition that people are experiencing? So, for example, the USDA, their definition of food insecurity is limited or uncertain access to adequate nutritious food. So limited or uncertain access to adequate nutritious food. Feeding America, the national network of food banks, has a similar description of food insecurity on their website that I'll link to in the show notes in case you want to dig into this more. But again, basically, like, financial insecurity means you're not sure that you're going to have enough money. Food insecurity means you're not sure that you're going to have enough nutritious food for you, for your household, for your children. And I'm personally most familiar with the situation regarding food insecurity in northern Illinois, because that's the food bank that I work at serves that part of Illinois. And so according to Feeding America data, 1 in 9 residents of northern Illinois faces food insecurity. And that includes 1 in 9 children in northern Illinois. So 1 out of every 9 kids in our community doesn't know that they're going to have the food they need. Wow, that's really significant. That is an immediate fact of relevance to this gospel value that we see from Matthew 25. As a disciple of Jesus, I deeply care about those kids, those 1 in 9 kids in northern Illinois. This raises the question, what is my response going to be? Now, among Christians in the United States, there are 2 basic camps that people fall into. Now, this is an oversimplification, obviously, but one camp is the government can really help address the needs of food insecurity. The other camp is the church should meet those needs and the government shouldn't really be involved. Now, I hasten to add, even among these 2 camps, both people agree that the church should be involved. It's just on the one side, people think the church can be involved and so can the government. On the other side, people think it should be the church and not the government. Okay, now I want to model what I'm talking about in charitably representing the view that's politically opposite to your own. So I'm not going to start by saying which viewpoint is my own, although the fact that I work for a food bank might kind of give it away. But I want to present the church should do it viewpoint as best and as charitably as I can. So I looked for a Christian who has this viewpoint, and I found one. He's a blogger named Alexander Griswold, and he has a blog piece from 2013, but the kind of philosophical questions haven't really changed since then. He's blogging for the blog Juicy Ecumenism, which is the Institute on Religion and Democracy's blog, so that's kind of a more conservative-leaning group in terms of thinking about how religion and politics interface. And Griswold is writing to counter the idea that Christian compassion should lead us to support federal programs that address food insecurity. So this is what he says about Christian compassion. He says, there is no Christian compassion when the state, relying on the threat of imprisonment or fines, takes from one man's wages and gives them to a second man. There is no Christian compassion when men who might give to charity use their contribution to federal programs to justify not doing so. There is no Christian compassion in spending billions more than we can afford, taking care of today's problems and expecting future generations to pay the bill. And there is certainly no Christian compassion in making millions of Americans dependent on bureaucrats in Washington instead of teaching them to forge their own God-given destinies. A paternalistic government welfare system robs all Americans of the positive spiritual growth that comes with personally caring for the poor. But it also robs the church of one of its most important responsibilities. Increasingly, the services traditionally provided by religious institutions, caring for the poor, education, moral upbringing, overseeing marriage, etc., are being absorbed by their secular counterparts. Religious institutions risk becoming increasingly irrelevant as they withdraw from public life and allow government agencies to fill the roles they've filled for millennia. Okay, so let's just pause there. Would you be able to charitably represent Alexander Griswold's view? Right? And so if Alexander Griswold's view is your view or similar to your view, that might be a really easy yes for you. But if you have a different view about the role of government or the state, it might be hard for you to charitably represent Alexander Griswold's view. But this is what I want to say. Alexander Griswold's view is not necessarily contradicting what Jesus teaches in Matthew 25. What he's saying is the way that Matthew 25 vision gets fulfilled is through the action of the church, not through the action of a state program that uses tax dollars and that essentially forces people through their taxes to fund that program. He says it should be free. It should be the generosity of individual people and the generosity of the church seeking to meet these needs rather than a forced or required government program. Now, this makes a lot of sense. This is, in some ways, a compelling argument. It's an argument that puts money back in people's pockets rather than taking it away and putting it in the government's hands. It's an argument for the freedom for individual people to participate in the process of helping people get the food that they need to thrive. It's an argument in favor of the church owning the responsibility for these things, which I think, again, that is the gospel value we all agree on, that we as disciples of Jesus, as the church, are responsible to respond to these things. So I think we can charitably present this view and say, like, okay, I get where this person is coming from, and not demonize this person or make them out to somehow be violating Christian teaching. Well, different Christian, also writing in 2013, as it happens, but again, the philosophical issues haven't really changed. Jen Pollock Michelle, she's writing a piece for Christianity Today, and she's talking about specifically SNAP, which is the biggest federal program that addresses food insecurity, uses tax dollars to route money for food to families and children that need it. So she writes this: I favor protection of SNAP, not because I cede what is arguably the church's responsibility to the state, but because I believe God has instituted the government as a servant for our good. Romans 13:4. Until the church can succeed in stretching its hands across demographic divides, rich and poor, black and white, urban and suburban and rural, for the necessary sharing of its resources, it cannot adequately resolve the inequities into which people are born. This necessitates some level of government intervention, including providing food for the hungry. Okay, so Jen Pollock Michelle's view, right? Again, think, is it easy for you to defend her view that, like, yes, the state should be involved, or is it hard for you to defend that view? But let's be charitable about it. Again, what's she saying? She's saying, look at the reality on the ground of what churches are like. Look at how divided the church is. Look at how many people are not actually connected to the church in a meaningful way. Can the church actually do this job? Can the church meaningfully reach everybody who's facing food insecurity? And she's saying, right now, maybe if an idealized future church could do that, but right now, it doesn't seem like the church could do that. There's a scale of problem here that the government is suited to help with in a particular way because the government encompasses all of society. And so she's basically saying, in order to get into all those nooks and crannies, in order to actually address the scale of the problem that we're facing, the government can be involved. It's not that the church shouldn't be involved, but that it doesn't have to be a totally either or. It's not either the church or the state. It can actually be a collaboration. Okay, now, again, I think we can see, this more collaborative view of the church and the state is also reasonable. It's reasonable in terms of the scale and magnitude of the problem. Again, 1 in 9 residents of Northern Illinois faces food insecurity. Could churches actually right-size their budgets to support that many people's access to food? What would that even look like? Just to give you a sense of the scale for the numbers, there's a think tank on federal policy called the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. They have a really nice state-by-state breakdown of SNAP benefits. And they showed that in the most recent fiscal year 2024, each household member per month received $192 in SNAP benefits. So that's $192 that could be spent specifically on food. Okay, now when you think about your grocery bill, that that seems like okay, $192 for a whole month for a person to get access to food, right? Like this is not a totally unreasonable amount of money. But what that adds up to is $4.47 billion in SNAP benefits distributed in Illinois as a whole, not just Northern Illinois, but Illinois as a whole in that same fiscal year. $4.47 billion. Okay, so now let's think about the government and church collaboration viewpoint versus the church only viewpoint. If that amount of benefit that people are getting is a good amount. Now that's a big if, right? People could debate, are some of those people able to get benefits in other ways, et cetera, et cetera. But if we start with that big if, they're like, no, that's a good amount of benefit for people to get access to food. And if the debate is, should church and government be doing it or should just the church be doing it? What would it look like to divide that up among the churches? Okay, how many churches are there in Illinois? There's roughly 12,000 churches in Illinois. So if you divide $4.47 billion in benefits by 12,000 churches, that would come out to over $372,000 per church per year. So could your church right-size your budget to provide $372,000 worth of benefits to people facing food insecurity in your communities? So here we get to kind of like a really pragmatic, almost realpolitik attitude about it, is like, what actually works? What actually works to make sure that people get the food they need to thrive, right? And if you're going to make an argument for the church alone should be able to do this, I would just be really intrigued to hear, well, what's your model for how the church could actually step up at that scale and do it? What would that look like? Okay, that being said, we still want to charitably represent that view. This idea that like the church, a private enterprise, should and could replace federal and state welfare programs to make sure that people have the food they need to thrive. Like that's a legitimate philosophical view that Christians can hold in good faith. I just want to say like, hey, the opposite view that there can be a collaboration between church and the state, between church and government, that's also a view that Christians can hold in good faith. And again, because I work for a food bank, I'm kind of an apologist and an advocate for the collaborative viewpoint. No surprise. So now, if you'll indulge me, I want to just take a moment to advocate for what is my particular view, right? Not the only legitimate Christian view, but this collaborative view. And I want to emphasize how collaborative the reality on the ground of the charitable food system already is. So I work for a regional food bank. We're like the distribution network. We support local food pantries and soup kitchens and other feeding programs to make sure that they can get the food we need. So we're the ones who are sourcing the food at scale, regionally, reworking it in the warehouse with volunteer teams if needed, and then transporting it out to the points where people actually get it in the form of groceries or meals. And across our service area, there are about 900, we call them agency partners or feeding programs. So an agency partner is a food pantry or soup kitchen. A feeding program is like something we run ourselves. Like we have these mobile markets where a truck, one of our trucks, will set up like a temporary food pantry in a parking lot at a specific day and time, for example. You add all those up, there's about 900 points of contact. So this is a big operation. We have 160 employees. We have a multi-million-dollar budget in order to make this work. You know the biggest source of funding for that multi-million-dollar budget? Individual donations. Individuals and families just writing a check or giving online because they believe in our mission. We are not primarily or even to a large extent supported by federal funding. Before some recent changes, because there have been some policy changes quite recently, federal funding accounted for about 12% of the meals that we distributed. So that's not a huge portion. It's significant. It's 12%. It's not anywhere near the majority. And so the charitable food network in our food bank and throughout the nation, it already is a collaboration of individual generosity, of churches, of those food pantries and soup kitchens. The majority of those are at churches, right? So it's not like an either or, like, oh, are you the nonprofit organization or are you the church? We're collaborating, right? There are churches, we couldn't do what we do without them being those frontline distribution points at the soup kitchens, at the food pantries. So it's a collaboration between private individuals, between corporations that donate to us, either food product or financial donations, between churches, right? And yes, also the government program. That's part of what we do. And we see what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. We're currently seeing 570,000 visits per month at our locations. That's been pretty consistent for the past year plus for us. 570,000 visits a month across our entire service area. So we know that SNAP, the federal program that allows people to go get food for themselves with those SNAP benefits, that actually really helps, because we've seen when those SNAP benefits are reduced, we naturally see increased foot traffic at our food pantries and our soup kitchens. And our food pantries and soup kitchens are already super near capacity, right? We're meeting the need, but there's not a ton of margin there. And so we're advocating that SNAP benefits be protected at the federal level, because we believe that's also part of the collaborative picture here. People get SNAP benefits. They can go get groceries for themselves. They can purchase it using their benefits. That's good. And people can come to our food pantry or soup kitchen or feeding program and get food there. That's good. It's all part of a collaboration. There's an ecosystem where we're working together as a community. Yes, using individual generosity. Yes, using the resources of the local church. And yes, using tax dollars in smart, savvy ways to combat food insecurity. Okay, so it's obvious what view I personally hold. But even with that passion that I have for that view, I recognize it's not the only view that Christians can have in good faith. And so can I charitably represent the opposite viewpoint in conversations? So in your workplace, let's say the issue of food insecurity comes up. Could you articulate why you care about the plight of people facing food insecurity as a disciple of Jesus, that gospel value, that Matthew 25 value? But then could you also articulate whichever political view is opposite to your own charitably? Could you say, I think that people of good faith, right? If you're talking to a Christian, Christians of good faith. If you're talking to a non-Christian, maybe just people of good faith. I think people of good faith who care about the plight of people facing food insecurity can disagree about what the practical government policy should be, right? Can you do that? Because if you can't do that, you need to question, is your allegiance primarily a gospel value allegiance? Or has it shifted to being an allegiance to your specific party, your specific viewpoint, your specific approach to these issues? Okay, so that's one practical way you can engage this issue and other issues, is think, what's the gospel value, and can I charitably represent the political viewpoint that's opposite to my own? And again, that's an expression of those things we talked about at the first part of the series, being prayerful, being thoughtful, being gentle, and being courageous. Can you engage every issue you talk about with prayer, with thoughtfulness, with gentleness, and with courage? It takes courage to represent multiple viewpoints charitably, because we have such a toxic culture of condemnation right now, where people just want to condemn the opposite viewpoint and demonize human beings rather than charitably, thoughtfully engage in conversation about these things. So you can provide a different way by thoughtfully articulating different viewpoints while also making that gospel value that you have really clear. Lord Jesus, give us your Holy Spirit, your wisdom to know how to talk about these things when they come up in work conversations, to know how to inform our own opinions, to know how to respect the opinions of others, and how, most of all, to be faithful to you, faithful to your gospel priorities. Jesus, do your work in us as we do our work with you. Amen.
Thanks for listening. Finding God at Work is a production of Mission Central, a ministry based in Aurora, Illinois, dedicated to forming Christians for mission in everyday life. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to this episode to get 10 minutes of teaching on faith and work every Tuesday and Thursday. To get resources to go deeper with each podcast series, read our blog, and get info about upcoming courses on faith in the workplace, go to our website, missioncentral.church.